Hey, everybody, it's the ShopNotes Podcast, episode number 233. I'm your host, Phil Huber, joined by Logan Whitmer and John Doyle. Logan is the editor-in-chief of Popular Woodworking Magazine. John Doyle is the designer-in-residence here at Woodsmith and ShopNotes, among many other talents. On today's episode, we're going to talk about mortising bits and mortising techniques. We'll also be talking about flaws, blemishes, and personality in your lumber choices. Really appreciate you listening and subscribing to Woodsmith, ShopNotes, and Popular Woodworking magazines. What brings this all together makes it possible for us to be here for the podcast. Also want to do a little reminder that for those of you who enjoy your podcasting on YouTube, that the ShopNotes Podcast is moving to its own podcast channel. It's at ShopNotes Podcast when you're on YouTube. So you want to search for that. Don't forget to like and subscribe to make sure you get all the updates when new episodes come out. All right. Also appreciate any questions or comments or smart remarks that you have for each episode, because it's what drives us. It is the rage that we feel in answering criticism that keeps us going throughout the week, frankly. This is how we get to Friday. So thanks for that. One more is a thank you to our sponsors who also enjoy the ShopNotes Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Harvey Industries. Good enough is not good enough. See all of our new woodworking tools at harveywoodworking.com. All right. Last week's episode had just a few comments. Elfida says, you've heard of Jeeves? Logan's butler is Mr. Chips. As in Mr. Chips, this goes in the chipper. Because Logan be fancy like that with his shop butler. Although it goes with John's side hustle that he was going to start. Mm-hmm. It's a franchise business, I believe. Shop Buddy, LLC.
Yep. Copyright pending there. Trademark.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. UNJJE says, I have a new pair of lineman pliers, just like John's saw with a little notch in the cutter.
Mm-hmm.
So
turns into a wire stripper. Yeah.
Yeah.
From a cutter to a wire stripper. That's how they make them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ian McCullough says, so what I'm taking away from this episode is that some saw modifications are just shocking.
Womp, womp, womp.
You know what you did.
Yeah. See yourself out.
Yep. Yeah. We are not above dad jokes on the ShopNotes Podcast. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Kick things started just before we started recording here. Logan was talking about his church door project, mm-hmm. which is what I find. I've built several passage or entry size doors, and it's really interesting to me how very similar it is to building a cabinet door in woodworking, but also extremely not the same.
Completely different. Time. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because you saw or you sent out a photo of the, I don't know, dry assembly of the doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
A few days ago.
I've had the doors together. And I went on Sunday. What's today? Tuesday? Yeah, I went Sunday to double check some sizes on the opening, because like I have this nightmare that I'm going to build these stupid doors based on the measurements I wrote down, and you know, me being a dummy, I measured something wrong, right? So I went and double checked because I'm like, this is like, I can just imagine getting these all together, getting there, and they're either too small or too big, right?
Right.
Better too big because you can cut them down. Like, it's harder to deal with too small a door. So I went and measured, and then I was like, all right, got these measurements. I have the picture in my head, took pictures standing there. I'm going to build the door jambs right now. That way, like, I'm building it into an opening into my shop. So, because there's the size of the door. So there's the opening in the church. There's that size. Then there's the opening in the door jamb. But within that opening, you have to house 2 doors, 6 hinges, an astragal strip that, keeps the 2 doors together. And you have to have room for everything to open and move freely, as well as have weather stripping blocks to hold weather stripping. So, like, there's a lot of moving parts. Like, the doors are one part of it, but then getting everything lined up and fitting right is the other part. So, jams are together, not done, but they're clamped together. So now I'm at the point where I have this morning got everything set up and started to mortise all of the parts because everything is held together with a cope and stick, basically, stub tenon and groove for the most part. But I want deeper mortises to hold everything. So what do? I decide the way to do this is to order the world's longest bit. So this is a 6-inch long end mill as a 4-inch cutting length, designed for metal. So it's a 4-flute end cutting mill, so you can actually plunge this. Some mills you cannot plunge. This one you can plunge. And I'm like, I'm gonna waller out some 4-inch deep mortises on this bad boy. We're gonna have 8-inch long loose tenons in there. World's gonna be great. This is far too grabby. There was just a 1/4-inch pass. There was a little pucker factor because you got this thing held in the router like this, and it's all spinning, and yeah. So changed my tune a little bit. I was texting my buddy Brian down in Atlanta. He does a lot of entry doors. He's like, yeah, try that on end grain because it'll be better. He said he uses a Felder slot mortiser. He's like, even the Felder is really grabby on side grain or at face grain. He's like, end grain goes a whole lot easier. But I'm like, you know what? These doors are only 30 inches wide a piece. They're heavy. They're 125 pounds. So they are heavy. But I think a 5-inch long floating mortise or floating tenon, so 2.5-inch mortise on each part, will be okay. So that's where I am at currently. Is I have a nice spiral upcut bit loaded up. I've done mortises in one of my styles already. They're 4.5 inches wide, 2.5 inches deep. I have 6 tenons in each style, so I think we'll be okay.
Okay.
So my buddy that my tree guy dropped off a load of logs. I don't think my wife listens to this podcast. She doesn't know that he dropped off a load of logs here yesterday, but he did. And he's the one that hooked me up with this church. He's Serbian, and he's like, why don't you just like glue it together as is and then just run super long screws in from the edge? I'm like, all right, first of all, this is why you do tree work and not woodworking.
Yeah, you use really long pocket screws. Come on.
Yeah. But I'm like, like I was talking to Brian when I was down there doing a photo shoot with him, and he's like, yeah, a lot of manufacturers, when they do doors, they use dowels.
Right.
And he said even vintage doors, they used dowels. He's like, and I've rebuilt a lot of vintage doors, and he's like, my problem is they come apart real easily when you're rebuilding them. I'm like, okay, well, that makes me not want to dowel it. But like, I don't hate the idea of like, I don't know how you'd have to do it, but like if you did like all thread through the top and bottom and a nut and then plug the holes. So
Okay.
At that point, you're basically doing what they would do with like a guitar neck. You're putting like a tension rod in there, but that's a really long hole to bore. And like, we're going to epoxy those loose tenons in clamp the snot out of it, she'll be just fine.
You could peg the loose tenons too from the inside face.
I could. That is true.
Because that's a legit technique and even has some historic precedent that I've seen.
Yeah, that is true.
Because it's not like loose tenon joinery is brand new.
Yeah.
For a joinery technique, it's been around a while, but if you didn't want them showing on the backside, those doors are plenty thick enough that you could run pegs in and have a lot of security that way.
Yeah, that is a good point. I could do that. And that actually makes clamping everything up a little bit easier, especially if I draw bore them a little bit.
Yeah, because you could glue the loose tenons into the rails, the horizontal pieces, let that dry, peg them, and then draw bore the other side. And
I think I'm way overcomplicating this, but
but it's also outside doors just have this weird life because
they do.
Half of it is inside and half of it's outside.
Yeah.
So it's like getting dry roasted in the winter and air conditioned, and then on the outside is whatever sunshine, rain, snow, sleet.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's like, I know I am overcomplicating it. Like at least the good part about these doors, the guys at the church built this porch, so there's a very large overhang over this door. Like,
that's excellent.
Like 12 foot deep and 14 foot wide. Like, it's a huge overhang. And I think they did that because their original doors that are on there were not weather tight. So like they were keeping a lot of the rain and stuff out doing that. So I have a lot going for me here, where there's, some protection, but so I'm hoping that by tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to be gluing up these doors. I would like to get some of these panels stained today so I can glue them tomorrow.
Nice.
So, the panels are a decently loose fit. Like, I got like an 1/8 inch all the way around, or 1/8 inch. So 16th all the way around. And I'm going to use some latex caulk dabs inside of there to kind of not secure them, but to keep them from rattling. They're tight enough thickness wise that they don't rattle, but I don't want them shifting around at all if I can help it.
Right.
So yep.
Cool. End is in sight then.
Yep.
So have you done, you're using the Panto router for this. Have you done extra deep, extra large mortises on the Panto router before?
Not that big. Okay. These are 1/2 inch by 4.5 wide by 2.5 deep. Biggest I've done, or maybe 2 by 1.5 inches deep, 2 inches long or 2 inches wide by 1 inch deep, by 1/2 inch. It handles it. I mean, absolutely no problem. Like,
okay.
Like the hardest thing is hindsight. I probably should have done these deep mortise and tenons, or these deep mortises, before I did the cope and stick.
Okay. Because
it would have been easier to line up. Because now that edge is profiled, it's hard to line up my center line of my tenon mark to the center line on the table on the Panto router.
Oh,
because there's no square reference edge. Yeah. So like, I'm getting close. And I'll probably just undersize those tenons width-wise. Instead of being 4.5, I'll probably go like 4 3/8. So there's just a hair of wiggle room there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the hardest thing. I mean, like, I can't use, because of the bit protrusion and stuff, I can't use the dust collection shroud on the Panto router, so it is very messy. It's not a clean operation. And I will throw hands with John. Mahogany dust is worse than walnut dust.
I can see that.
Yeah. like because it is just
statement.
everything is red everywhere. Like everything in the shop is red.
Mm-hmm.
I did this weekend order so I've talked about putting a like attic fan, whole house fan in the shop before, and like turning that on and blowing dust to let it suck through the roof. I decided that was a little ridiculous. So instead I ordered a 36-inch drum fan that I'm going to put in the doorway, and then I'm going to backpack leaf blower.
Mm-hmm.
So that's supposed to be here Thursday. So we're gonna blow everything out into the wilderness. So
is that going towards the house though? You're gonna make it that far?
It's completely. I don't think it's gonna make it that far. It is a 22,000 CFM fan. It's huge. So I'm pretty excited about it.
All right. So if on the next Shop Notes podcast, we have a little story about the fact that Logan's pole barn shop building just kind of imploded, like just squished in, you'll know why.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Sorry, it is a 21,800 CFM.
Oh, well, that makes a big difference then.
Yeah. Probably won't upload at that point.
Yeah. John, have you ever done a door that size?
No, I don't think I've done like entry type doors I've done big cabinet doors that are, 3/4 inches thick or 1 inch thick, but nothing like that heavy or big. So
yeah,
it's new territory for me too.
Now, when you do, so not doors, but just large mortises in general, what do you use for a mortising technique?
If I'm taking the time to like do them the way I'd like to do them, I usually try to use like a router to get good clean sides and everything sized correctly. But most of the time when I'm in a hurry here, it's just drill them out at the drill press and kind of rough them out and chisel. Seems to go faster than trying to find all the right bits and tools and setup and all that stuff. So
yeah,
that's the quick and dirty way. But if I want to do it right, I would use some sort of router and edge guide jig and do it that way.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. Seems like you just get a smoother surface, for gluing and contact. So.
Right. I feel mostly the Gen X part of me feels a little rebellious to the fact that when I started at Woodsmith, whenever we talked about mortising, it was always drill it out at the drill press and then clean it up along the edges with a chisel and chop it square. And there was just no consideration of other techniques. And I get that it's pretty accessible if somebody has a drill press, because you can do that even with a small benchtop drill press. That approach works. I think you need the right technique for it. But my issue has always been consistency on mortises done that way. Because I'd like all of the mortises to be pretty close in their width, and that's not easy to do at the drill press.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion.
Yeah. When we were doing, I think it was the trestle table class, you had brought in your mortising jig and router and had it all set up for loose tenons. And that was the first time that I'd done it before, but it might have just helped that you set it all up and it was just ready to go. That was like, oh, this is pretty slick, Everything's uniform sized and smooth and ready to go. And so, yeah, this is pretty nice. I can get behind this. So.
Yeah. No, I've spent a bunch of time on that jig, and it's grown on me that I really like that technique. I do use the Jessam, what is it, Pocket Mill Pro
Mm-hmm.
the like drill powered kind of slot mortiser thing. Craig Tool has a version of it now, and those are
Made
really
by
cool.
Jessam, just to point
Made
that
by
out.
Jessam.
Don't get off
Mm-hmm.
Craig's back.
We were all getting worked up there.
Come to the defense of my boys.
Yeah.
And my girls over at Craig.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm saying I like
Craig
them.
stole it. No.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I know.
Craig did not steal it. They worked together.
No. Yes. They
Team
developed
effort.
it together.
So anyway, but that method works really well too. And it's kind of shocking how smooth of a process that can be. So
Now, let me ask you guys something, just because I mean, related to the door thing, but in general in your projects, because I have spent a lot of time looking at hardware, and I am currently looking at an ad for hardware because I have done such, and everybody knows what we do now. When you guys are buying hardware for a project, how do you choose what quality of hardware you are getting? For example, the desk I'm sitting at, I had planned on ordering really nice, hand forged type hardware for this desk. Some high quality hardware, but I wasn't. The stuff I found that I liked was super expensive. The stuff that was a little bit less expensive didn't meet the aesthetic I wanted, so I actually ended up buying like super inexpensive hardware from Menards. But these these church doors, I told the guys at the church, I'm like, hey, like these are going to be pretty nice doors, if I do say so myself. So like, let's not throw a Menards Master Force handle on them. Like do me a solid. I'm not charging you for these doors. Like, you're paying the materials, but do me a solid and like at least buy some decent hardware. And we got quotes. We got one quote from a hardware company here in town, and for what they call ladder pulls, which are basically those, think of the big vertical handles, that are, there's nothing on them. It's just a handle that you pull. 2 ladder pulls, 2 push plates for the inside, 6 hinges, 2 bolts for the top and bottom of the door, of the non-operating door, and door closers. It was like $3,300, which seems extravagant. And that's me saying that. Like, that seems excessive. I know that door hardware is expensive. But if you extrapolate this out to like something like a smaller project, like a box, like a nice little jewelry box or something, you can buy hinges on Amazon for $2 for a pair, or you can buy a set of Brusos that will be $200. Like, how do you guys get to the end point where you're ordering hardware, and what, how do you decide how much you're spending?
Mm-hmm.
John just goes through the drawers in the shop.
Yeah. Free. I'm trying to spend free. No, I go with the date, marry, kill method of purchasing hardware.
Okay.
How long am I going to have this project? Is this just for a little bit? Am I just dating this project? Am I going to marry this project? Is it going to be around forever? Am I going to have to replace this hardware if I don't get good enough stuff? Or is this just a kill? I'm just building a reader's tip. I'm going to take a photograph of it and then I'm going to throw it away, type of thing. Just get the cheapest thing. So it's how much am I going to have to deal with this hardware? How much is it going to get used? Am I going to have to keep adjusting this if it's around for a long time? So that's kind of my my motto of hardware purchasing, because it seems like we've built tiny boxes for the TV show, and I've gone through the sources to buy the the hinges for them, and it's like $150 hinges or something like that for a little tiny box. And it's like, it's not going to get that much use. You're not going to see, I have a hard time, like, spending that much for the hardware on a small project. But like what you were talking about, big heavy doors that are going to be around forever, let's spend the money, get something nice, something that's going to last, because I don't want to come back to replace the hardware. So.
That's fair. I think I try to take like a middle of the road approach, because I've been burned too many times on really cheap hardware that has a nice appearance. To me, it has to do like knobs and pulls. It's like, what does it feel like when you grab onto it? Does it feel like it's just bent metal? Which they can be, but did they do it in a way that makes it comfortable to hold on to? Mm-hmm. Are there sharp edges on the backside, or is the plate metal actually bent around and then closed off so that it forms this, more like a tube construction that you can feel a little more secure in using? One practical example is, we had Mike Pekovich in for doing a TV show episode, and he was building one of his little T-chest boxes and left stunt parts here, and I'm finishing that project up. And I was asking him about hardware that he used for the lid, because it's got two little hinges on the lid. And he sent me a link, and this is not to disparage one maker over another, but he sent me a link for Brousseau hinges that were basically 1 inch by 1 inch when the hinges open, butt hinges when they're open. And it was $50 for a pair, which I've seen Brousseau hardware. We've used their stuff on a bunch of our projects here. It's amazing to have a butt hinge like that work the way that it should. And it's super cool, but I couldn't spend that. I don't know. I just couldn't justify that for hinges that were that small. And like you said, John, it's not like this thing's getting open 60 times a day. I ended up finding similar hinges from Horton Brasses, which still pricey, but those were $20 a pair, and that felt better to me. So those are the ones that I ordered. Everybody's going to draw their line in a different place. I think it also depends on the level of the project. Is it an everyday entertainment center TV cabinet kind of a thing? Then it's going to get more middling hardware, in my opinion, than something that's meant to be like a 25th anniversary jewelry box or something like that, where you might splurge on some stuff. You want a glue that you can trust, and fortunately, Titebond has the glue you need to get the job done with confidence. From interior glues with strong initial tack and short clamp time, to exterior glues with exceptional strength and water resistance, look to Titebond, the right glue for your next project. For more information, visit Titebond.com.
Well, that's kind of like, I'm trying to help the church figure out, like, not where they could save money, because that's obviously not what we're trying to. I'm not trying to get them the cheapest hardware. I'm trying to get them a good value hardware that isn't going to take away from the doors, because they want these doors to be nice. So right. I'm looking at some of the hardware available on Amazon, and it's like, man, it just doesn't. Some of it's okay. Some of it appears to be okay. Like, obviously, you can't touch it and feel it, so I don't know. But then there's some things on them, like, you could tell that's kind of a cheap handle. Like, most of these ladder pull style, you have the handle, and then you have 2 studs coming off of it that bolt through the door to those studs. Some of the ones on Amazon, it's like, well, this stud actually slips over a piece you screw onto the front of the door like a toilet paper holder. And then there's a set screw on the bottom. And I'm like, yeah. And that's kind of where I'm like, this just is not right. Like this, it's better than putting, black pipe flanges with black pipe on the door, but not by much. Not by much. So. But what you shouldn't do is you should never use those white vinyl drawer slides from the big box store.
Yes.
That's what you should never do.
Never, ever.
Ever.
I mean, if you're a serious woodworker.
Yeah. So.
True story. Yeah, picking hardware is not easy to do. I don't think because it's a choose your own adventure every time you do it.
Yeah, and most of it's
there's
online,
something to be
like you said, and you can't feel it, so it's kind of just a guessing game.
Yeah, you're going to have to be okay with being wrong and or returning stuff or just kind of eating a few of them to figure out whose stuff actually matches the quality that the pictures appear to show.
Yep.
If that's a thing.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I will say is like going through a nice let's say a high quality company for hardware and just like browsing their site, the amount of different things that they have makes me want to build stuff that I would have never wanted to build before. Just seeing some of the cool hardware they have. Like right now I'm on the Horde Brasses site because Brusso for some reason the website's down. But like there is a tip top table catch that just looks super sweet. It's $210.
Yeah.
I've never had a desire to build a tip-top table, but I want to use that hardware for something because it looks sweet. Yeah. So some of it is just super cool. But
right. Yeah, hardware catalogs are very dangerous. And even their sites, when you start cruising around on it, it's like, I kind of want to build kitchen cabinets so that I can use all these pulls and really nice, brass hinges on them. And or build things that have locks, like drawer locks or little chest locks and put those on. And would you ever use them? No. Like 90% of chest locks that go on boxes or tool chests or something like that never get used.
Unless you're hiding your Girl Scout cookies from your spouse. Like this, come on. A Sheraton knob. It's just this really cool floral topped knob from Horton Brasses, but it is $114. Oh God. So I don't know. Like I will say, several years ago when I did this dovetailed tool chest for Popwood, that was one of my first like full build projects for the magazine.
Oh yeah.
I did buy really nice hinges from a company in Ireland, maybe. And I mean they were kind of knife hinges a little bit. And I love them. They weren't $100 for the pair, but they were up there. Like they were close. But they are, if for some reason that chest ever goes away, that's the one you take the hinges off of.
All right. That's fair.
Yep.
I think small boxes, where you have a much closer interaction with it, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Quality quality hinges make more of a difference, because on a small box, crappy hinges that have a lot of side to side play, you really notice that a lot more than you do on a bigger project.
I will say, it seems to be that some of the hinges available on Amazon really seem to be pretty decent for the price. And I was first told that, and I didn't believe it. I don't remember if it was, I know it was either Shea or Shea Alexander or Albert Klein when we were there working on projects in Shea's shop. One of them had mentioned it, like, oh, these are from Amazon, and they're actually super nice. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then I started playing with them during the photo shoot. I'm like, oh yeah, these actually are kind of nice. So those are the hinges we ordered for the little mantle box class I did. I taught, and they are like pretty good budget hinges for what they are. But again, as you said, you kind of have to weed through them and be okay ordering stuff and then just shoving it in the hardware drawer for later use if it's not what you want.
Yeah. All right. Somewhat related to that, question that I had came up as a project that I'm working on for myself here is what you could sometimes call, I don't know, flaws or blemishes, personality in your lumber, and how you would either cut around it or avoid it or incorporate it into a project. And my specific example here is I'm making a small box or a tote to store some of my carving gouges in. And this should come as no surprise to people. I'm making it out of white pine. But the piece that I have has the blue stain along the edge, like kind of where the sapwood is. And it's the result of beetles and fungus working together, if I'm understanding the science behind that. Though I am no wood scientist like John is. Sometimes they call it, like turn a problem into a friend, like denim pine, because it has that color of kind of a medium toned denim look to it. And since it's a shop project, I am going to try and incorporate it into it because I think it would have a cool look. But would like to know from you guys, what are some of the quirks of some materials that you've used and incorporated into a project?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like wood defects that I've incorporated. Doesn't necessarily come to mind, but there are like woodworking screw ups that I've had to turn into some sort of feature where it's like, oh, well, I'll just put some sort of walnut inlay into this rabbit that I cut on the wrong edge of this tabletop or something like that. So like,
what about say, like if you're working with oak or even cherry, you can get small pin knots where it doesn't look like knotty pine, but they are smaller knots. Like at what level do you just roll with that and rock it? Right. And then where are you like, nope, the board has to be pretty flawless. Yeah.
No, the game table that we built recently for Woodsmith, and I'm not going to say where we got the lumber from, but we had to work with it.
It was budget clearance.
Yeah, the price was right.
Okay.
The budget it worked with the budget, but no, there were some knots in there that we kind of featured and put black super glue into to kind of tighten them up, and they look good, and some streaks of sapwood, and I mean by the time we got all done, it looks great. I mean, it looks like natural wood. And so I mean there were some defects and some wormholes that we filled in that, but covered them up or filled them, and what else did we do? We put some coffee grounds and super glue and some stuff and filled it. And so I think it looks great.
So
because I mean, some of the mahogany that you had for the church doors, Logan, had some significant wormholes in it. Yeah, man, there you go.
Yep. I don't know how well those show up. So there's one there, and there's one there, and they protrude through on the backside there. You can really see them.
Yeah.
So like I fall under the mentality of like wood is a natural product, right? It's never perfect. You can get clean and clear stuff, but that, in my mind, sometimes takes away from what it is, right? Like if you want to build a desk out of quarter sawn white oak, and you do it all out of perfectly quarter sawn, beautiful flake white oak, it almost looks like a veneered piece.
Right.
Because, like you went through that trouble. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't pick out good, clean stuff, because I think you should. But like, there's a point where I think you have to roll with what the material is and pay homage to it being a natural material. The desk I'm sitting at, the Craftsman desk, had kind of a calico-y section of the tree, so my top has some dark mineral stained spots on it. Like, it's kind of cool. It's a quirk about it. Now, there's a point where wormholes in an entry door, that is a problem. Like, you don't want that. So these two in this panel happened to pop up after I routed the OG for this panel, and they're packed with mahogany dust. Like, I don't know what type of worm this was, because they're huge. Some of them I could actually stick my pinky through the holes. I'm going to try to stain this and see what those wormholes look like. I might have to. What I really probably ought to do is seal around these with shellac, soak them with super glue to harden up this sawdust that's there. It's actually really hard. It's hard to pick out. It's so dense. And then see if I can use this piece. Like there's points where it's structural that you want to avoid it, right? Like if a wood is so punky that it's kind of crumbling and falling apart, maybe that's not the right thing to use for your table legs.
Right.
But if you use it, if you're deliberate on how you use it, and you know what it is, to me it's part of the charm. It's part of the story of that tree and how you used it. I used the calico white oak for the top on this desk. There is some nasty parts of this white oak, but they're in the back because I wanted those in the back. That walnut, so that walnut that we used for the game table, as John said, it ended up being a lot worse than I thought it was. Like, hindsight, and I told you guys this as we were working on it, hindsight, it took us a lot of work to use that. The better use of that walnut, in my opinion, would have been cutting it up into much smaller pieces for some like chair parts and stuff like that, where you need small pieces. And some of the grain was a little squirrely, and that would work fine for like curved backs of chairs and stuff like that. But we made it work, and at the end of the day, it looks really cool. Would it have looked just as cool out of straight quarter riffs on walnut? Maybe, but it would lose a little bit of the charm.
Yeah. I think it also depends on how you use it too. Like if you if you were gluing up your desktop, let's just say it's a 4-board glue up. 3 of them are fantastic, and then the 4th one is the calico. Then that stands out in all the wrong ways.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Whereas I was trying to be deliberate with it. So 2 of them are booked. I'm looking at them. 2 of them are book matched, and then the other 2 are book matched on the opposite end. So you kind of have this houndstooth type thing going on. So actually, the one on this end kind of has faded out after it's sat in the sun for a while. So, like if you're deliberate on how you use it, I think it'd be very cool. There was a project right after I started, and I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was Dylan's arched stretcher sofa table that I remember sitting in a meeting, and there was a strip of sapwood in it, and it was used pretty deliberately. Like, I think they were like, almost book matched, so it kind of looked like a kind of a wavy trail through the center of the top. But Todd was like, we don't use sapwood. And I'm like, why not, man? Like, yeah, what? And he was very like, I think it was Todd. It was kind of like, don't want that.
Yeah. So, that was just the woodsmith way for the longest time. It all had to be very sterile, like evenly colored, cherry or maple, and it had to be this stain and it had to be this color to photograph it, and no personality. So Dylan came along and just shook up the woodworking world.
Now, I do think that there are instances also where you need to have consistency. I have 2 orders of mahogany here for these doors, and we noticed this. Liberty Hardwood must have got a shipment of albino mahogany.
Yep.
Because my first order was this beautiful, like, kind of mahogany color that you think of, like it's that rich, warm brown, right? The second order I went and picked up a couple days ago was the same pale stuff that we got for the bar top.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of like, it's okay for the door frame, I think. But part of what this mahogany has to make is the trim that gets applied to the front of the door. And it is it's significantly lighter. I think it's going to be okay because I am staining it.
Yeah.
And all of that trim will be the same lighter mahogany. So, it might look deliberate, but because I am staining it, I think it's going to be okay. But like, that's an instance where if I was doing just a straight clear coat, I'd have an issue with it.
Cool. Can't wait to see how it turns out.
Me either.
All right, there's our discussion questions for this episode of the ShopNotes podcast. How do you choose hardware for your projects? What's your good, better, best quality flowchart decision tree that you go through in picking hardware? And then how do you use wood and lumber in your projects in terms of its personality quirks? Is it sapwood, knots, color variations, wormholes, staining due to either mineral or spalting or other kind of, fungal diseases or whatever that's going on in your materials? How do you pick that out? What do you do to work that in? Send us your thoughts and comments on that. You can put that on the comments section on our YouTube channel. That's the ShopNotes Podcast on YouTube. You can send us an email, woodsmith@woodsmith.com. Otherwise, we will see you next week, everybody. Enjoy your sauna. Bye.